Welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people here. I would like to thank all of you for being here. Thank our board members that are here, and Kimberly and her staff. This would not have been such a wonderful event without your hard work and dedication. So thank you all of y'all are here. And the artist, cannot wait to hear your stories. Thank you. And so enjoy the evening. Thank you so much. And this is Kimberly Snyder, our executive director, so she will share more about the exhibition.
Well,
thank you
so much.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate the long-awaited opening of the Made of Memory exhibition. My name is Kimberly Snyder, the executive director of the museum, and this project has been in the works for over 2 years, and we're so excited to see it come to fruition. There are so many details involved in creating an exhibition, especially one like this. I recently read a quote, and it made me reflect on the work that we do. When buying from an artist, you're buying more than just an object. You're buying hundreds of hours of failure and experimentation. And I think that both not only applies to artworks, but also exhibitions as well. And the artworks you'll see tonight, some were exclusively created for this exhibition, some were inspired by a permanent art and history collection. Everything from the artworks created, the exceptional exhibition design, the thoughtfully written text and labels, the beautiful installation, and the countless hours by the artists, curators, the installation team, and the designer. And I'd really like to take a moment to express my gratitude to all of you for creating this incredible show. This program tonight was created as a special opportunity for our members and supporters to hear from the exhibiting artists, Cynthia Brannvall, Trinh Mai, Harris Seeger, Priyanka Rana, Shirin Towfiq, and our co-curators, Allison Raylo and Michelle Zubelee. We have some beautiful wine tonight from Galley Winery, and of course, lovely flowers from Centerpiece. They're both local Los Gatos businesses that we're proud to have on display. And of course, what makes our work possible is the incredible support from our community like you. The NUMU Board of Directors, our circle members, our members, and donors, and specifically for this exhibition, our sponsors, the Bordnick Foundation and Wanda Kaunacki. Thank you for supporting the museum and help us deliver on our mission. And if you're not a museum member, I invite you to join us tonight. We do stuff like this all the time. It's great. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the NUMU curator, Allison Raylo.
Hello everyone, thank you. It's wonderful to see so many friendly faces. The people that I love are here to support us. It's been such a joy to work with all the artists and with Michelle. We've really just spent so much time thinking about the themes, the ideas, the concepts, and they've all enjoyed really getting to know each other and seeing the connections in their work. Everything we do here is such a team effort. You and Cristiano is like our visionary exhibition designer. We will be hearing from all the artists tonight, and Michelle and I are going to tell you a little bit more about our process and our themes that go throughout the gallery. So that's where we'll start. Michelle.
Thank you so much for being here. The last time I was in Los Gatos was a year ago, and I was with the museum full-time but moved to San Diego, so I've been able to work on this project remotely. And being in person this week, to be with the art and help nail things into the wall and paint and everything was just so cathartic and really beautiful and very poetic. This show really came about very intuitively, I feel. Pretty much right off the bat, all of this grouping of wonderful artists really made sense to us. And there are so many layers within the artwork that you see around you, from the colorway, from the stories, the references, the symbols. So with that, this section of the gallery really dives into a theme of nature, and that's present throughout, but we really wanted to draw that out, not only because of the use of certain natural materials in the works themselves, but the stories that are carried with us perhaps in our childhood, of the physical places we grow up, but also nature as being able to calm us, as you hear with these beautiful bird sounds, but also waterways taking people across oceans as they migrate, and just experiences on the land with the land. And I'd like to first introduce Priyanka, who will share a little bit more about her sculpture.
Hi everybody. So big thank you to the local team for all the volunteers there that invited me on this exhibition. Thank you. And thank you for being here. So I'm not a good public speaker. My daughter already said you said it to me. So please, I let my sculpture speak most of the time. So I came into my practice pretty late in my life. I graduated from doing an undergrad and being a good Indian kid, doing an undergrad in mathematics, economics, and an MBA. And then in 2018, I started a full-time practice of sculpting. And untreated wood is my primary medium. And there is a duality in my work, which is part dangerous and part delicate. The dangerous part is when I'm working with the wood, dressed like an astronaut, my kids can't access me, they have to stand on the side if they need me. And the delicate part is creating these objects that I enrich the wood with. And these are the memory parts. I call them memory parts. So moving across continents in my life, I realized the only thing I can count on bringing along with me are my memories. And that made me think, what is memories? You know, this life within us, but that also lets us process this life outside of us. How do we create these memories? How do we store them? How do we access them? And what does it do to us? And then that led me to the question that if memories could physically manifest, what shape would they take? I thought they'd be round and without edges and soft and glowy. And fabric was such a big part growing up in India, so I used a lot of traditional fabric. My mom's here, and the first time I cut a nice silk handloom sari, she's like, what did you do? I said, trust me, it's going to go someplace nice. Yeah, well, here we are. So I experimented with these memory parts and put them in my sculptures. And over time, my relationship with wood has also changed. You know, from thinking of it as a pet that I had to cajole and maneuver, to a sibling that I have to fight and share, to a friend that I have to listen. And you can see that change happening over time with the wood. I've recognized the history of the wood that comes with it. For instance, if there is an infestation, I follow the bug, and I call it collaboration with the bug. So instead of fighting and thinking that it's poor quality, accepting that it brings its history along with the sculpture. So this is a piece I'm going to talk about. It's titled Coast Minar. My dad couldn't make it, but it's actually a memory of my childhood with him. So when we would travel to go and meet my grandparents who were farmers, there would be farm fields on both sides. And depending on the season, it would be wheat or paddy. It's a beautiful sight with birds flying on the top. Yes, and the birds flying on the top. And imagine a car full of 3 kids. So to keep us busy, he'd tell us, go find a coast minar. And a coast minar is an ancient pillar. It's a milestone that was built by a 16th century Pashtun ruler, Sher Shah Suri, on the Grand Road trunk of north of India. And imagine they still exist, harmlessly, aimlessly, beautifully, in the fields, on the street. And I feel it's a privilege to see them. Why are they standing and how are they standing? And you would feel so privileged to find it on your side of the window. But since I'm the youngest of 3, I would be sitting in the middle. Sister somewhere here, I know. But I could still find them. I said, I found it. I found the coast minar. And then I chose a fabric from India, which represent those fields, which is green and yellow in color. And then I, made these waves as a pathway to the coast minar and to my grandparents' house. And then I char it, and then I install it. So in some ways, that memory of seeing the coast minar is now printed on the minar itself. And why this title? I felt I was fascinated by the etymology of the word. So coast is an ancient Sanskrit unit for distance, and minar is a Persian word for, Arabic word for pillar. And I felt that fluidity of two distinct histories coming together to form our identities is exactly what we're talking in this show. Yeah, thank you.
I'd now like to introduce Trinh, and I just want to point out, our title even was really a special discovery in our process of thinking of how do we title this show. But Made of Memory really felt like it embodied the act of taking memorabilia and moments and materials and even clothing and using that to turn into these beautiful works of art.
Hi everyone! This is so exciting to be back in the Bay Area and showing and having worked with Michelle and the team, this small, intimate, beautiful, dedicated group of people, very inspiring to watch our work together. This is especially special for me because neither of these works I thought would move outside of the studio. So the way I approach the art is just with the desire to bring art to life, and that is enough. So whether or not it shows, whether or not it ends up in someone else's home is not really, I don't think that far ahead. Maybe I should, because then it comes to install and I'm like, oh, I didn't bring it. So Michelle had come for a studio visit, and we were flipping through drawings, and she found these, and they were unfinished. I started them in 2018, which was a really rough time for us at the time. A lot of the Vietnamese Cambodian community were being deported and retained. And so these birds, they're alive, I promise, they're just really exhausted. And some of them are wounded. And so it was very difficult for me to move through, and so I just kind of put them aside because the heart can only handle so much. But with the invitation to show, it was really the nudge I needed to just finish unfinished work, and y'all artists know so much unfinished work. And so I pulled them out, and it was such an interesting dynamic because, there's some friends that there's such a kindred spirit there that you might not talk to them for years, but then you see them and then you just kind of pick back up. These were not those friends. So I really had to re-familiarize myself with it, and I thought it would be so easy because the bird was finished, the text was almost finished, and for some reason I had to kind of be really patient and give it time to complete. And here's a confession. I actually finished this piece the morning that we left to drive up here. So I want to speak a little bit on the fear that happens in the process, that I'm like daily trying to, daily I'm praying for courage, that I might do what I need to do for the day. But I had this idea of using this cadmium red to illustrate the woundedness. And how there's hope in this healing, like no matter how severe it seems. And I knew I needed to do it, but it was very intimidating because one, it's cadmium red. I mean, like the most intimidating color for me. It's bright, it's bold, it's strong, and I was afraid to ruin the work, right? Like you get to a point, it's like, oh, I could kind of push forward or not. And so I kind of fear won that battle. And so a week goes by, and I wake up at 6 a.m. We were leaving to drive up here with all the artwork at 10. And I wake up and I was like, I refuse to make decisions out of fear. Like I cannot entertain this. And so I woke up, I took it back out of, it was already packaged, shaped up. I took it out of the box, hung it back up, took it out of the frame, hung it back up, and was praying the whole time I was working on it, just like, I cannot ruin this, I don't have time to order another pattern, this must work, and thank goodness, like, it did, and it really needed that, but I wanted to, so something else that I've been really interested in my work is to break it past the borders of what initially it might be comfortable in. So it echoes what we're trying to do in life, right? We just want to push a little bit further, push that painting a little bit further past what we are comfortable with, and risk ruining it, which happens often in my work, which is why I work in so many mediums, because I'm like, what else do I not know how to do that might make it a little more difficult in the studio? Let's do that. So and I had the idea that it would, the blood, so the life force, might kind of push past our boundaries. So when we think about suffering and the things that we go through personally, it's easy to be very focused on the self, because this is what we can manage. Well, even then, I might have a hard time managing just myself. But then as we work and we confront that fear or doubt, whatever it might be, there's a moment where it expands out to, there's other people that go through the same thing. There's other artists that are doubting their abilities, no matter how long we've been doing this for. Like, we've been dedicated for 20 plus years, and still there's those moments of doubt. And then it spreads out to the greater community, and there's an entire people that go through this. And then it expands, and we realize that what we're going through is so much greater, and it's shared vastly. And then it gets so broad and so vast where it's just so hard to handle, because then we recognize the suffering of the world. And so then it kind of contracts back to this what we can handle. So I imagine this process as an expansion and a contraction, kind of like our lungs, right? When we're breathing, and there's this rhythm that happens, and we have to come back to what we know before, or I have to come back to what I know so that I can sit with it in intimacy and really face it and confront it and like treat it with like tenderness, so that I can kind of move out to the greater world and share that same grace and tenderness. So one of the stories that really, so I was born here in Pennsylvania. My family escaped the war in Vietnam, as did my husband, who's somewhere here. And they arrived in 1975. They left the day that Saigon fell, so April 30th, 1975, and settled in a refugee camp in Pennsylvania. And then I was born in Harrisburg after they settled. And I hear these stories, and speaking of like this inherited memory, so people have asked me, like elders will ask me, what year did you come here? Because my Vietnamese is, I guess, better than I think it is. But like, what year did you come here? And I'll say 1975. And then I'll have to catch myself and like realize that I was born here. And so I totally recognize my privilege of being able to choose what I want to do in my life, be able to have the freedom to heed the call, to make the art, and to have the voice to share it. This piece here was inspired by my husband's story. When he was a young boy, his father was imprisoned in a re-education camp for several years in Vietnam. He served as a governor for 2 terms, and when they arrived, he worked in the fields in the Central Valley. So the oil fields and whatever crop was ready to be harvested, that's where they worked. And so one day, the whole family would go out there and work together. So the young boys would go out there and work with the parents. His mom was in charge of taking care of the younger kids and making sure that they had food to eat. She'd bring the food and prepare the food during their breaks. And during that time, the farmers used to have these huge cages that would trap the birds to keep them away from the crop. And Ken was 5 or 6 at this time, and he wanted to help catch the birds. And they were so poor that they would actually go into the cages and catch the birds so that they can bring them home to eat. And Ken's mom had made a rice sack and turned it into a drawstring bag to keep the birds, which is like this first one here with the rice sack. That's a sack I actually inherited from my grandmother. And so he wanted to help, and so she let him into the cage, and he caught this little brown bird. And then he let it go. And so his father asks him, why did you let the bird go? And he said, because it was afraid, and I didn't want to see it afraid. And this little boy, like having such compassion, it really struck me, and I wanted to relive the memory. And so I didn't know I was making art, because it's kind of just like, wait a minute. This is the first one I made, just so I could do it in my home, made of my grandmother's fabric that I inherited as well. And so I made this one bird, and then they bred, and we ended up with 82 of them. He and his family came over in 1982. So he catches this bird, lets it go, and they have this rice sack that has all of these other birds in it. And his father looks at him and says, do you want to let the other birds go? And he said, yes. And he says, if you want to see them free, then you must be the one to feed them. And everything about that story struck me. Like the compassion of this young boy, his father being a survivor of war and honoring that compassion. And also him teaching this young boy a very important lesson that should be for an adult, right? So him one day, this is so I had heard this story like many years ago. I made this one, and it was so enjoyable because it's tactile. I'm using fabrics, which I hadn't really done before. And these are little Vietnamese green finches that are only found in Vietnam. So like the hood, they're actually black and white, but they have this funny little hood, which is very interesting too. I think Alexandria had mentioned they look like carrier pigeons, and also thinking about how prisoners of war will have, the hoods put over their heads. So that was the process of the work just keeps revealing these layers of meaning, and that's what I love about the artistic process, is I just want to discover things. Like I feel like I have X amount of information and knowledge, but really I just want the revelation. And so when it comes to artist statement, it's like, how do you condense it into this little didactic? So Hien decides, just like a few years ago, he took me on a tour of the farms. It was like a surprise. So we drive through the Central Valley, and we went to visit the farms, gathered dirt for other projects, and the cotton fields were abloom. And so we harvested cotton from these fields that his family worked on when he first came to America. So all the birds are stuffed with the same cotton. That was, so then about a year later, he takes me to this abandoned carrot factory. It was a carrot bell pepper factory that his brother and his father used to work in, and he would go play in the fields. And we find this crate. And of course, because we collect everything, I was like, babe, we have to take it. So I brought it home and didn't know what I was going to do with it. I had some ideas, but nothing really. I was kind of trying to force it into something, so I just kind of let it breathe. It was in the corner of the studio, and then I started flipping it around one day, and it looked like a cage. And so this was about a year from the time I started making these birds to the time we find this crate. And it came together to help illustrate this story. Isn't it amazing how art just does that? If we just let it, like, get out of the way, Trinh. Like, just let the work move the way it moves, because it really does come alive. And I didn't know what this thing was, because we were thinking bell pepper and carrot factory, they're in, the cardboard boxes, so it didn't quite make sense. And then my friend comes over and was like, I have a crate like that. Do you know what it is? And it happens to be a crate that they used to use to carry egg cartons. So we have these, yes! So that's why I make art, because that is so exciting, and it happens all the time throughout the process. So yeah, these little birds, and there were 82 of them, but little by little we've been like giving them to various ones, so I don't know how many are here, but they might grow, probably. It's very meditative, so thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Shirin Towfiq. I knew that I could tell stories all day, so I actually just wrote something so I could be as succinct as possible, telling you about the art. So I wanted to start by saying there are many old Persian folklore stories that write about magic carpets, but there's one that explains how the magic carpet is able to fly. It's said that the carpet is woven with gold threads, and that creates a magnetism with the earth, allowing it to travel anywhere instantaneously in the world. I use the metaphor of the magic carpet in a lot of my work. In the piece, Thinking About Migration Against the Back Wall, I use silk gauze that I digitally print on with archival ink. Their delicate gauzy materialities suggest bodies of Iranian migrants and the precarity of migration. Their delicate motion and scale creates an ambivalent sensation, simultaneously of overwhelming vulnerability and loss, while suggesting a calm freedom swaying easily in the wind. You'll notice as the wind continues to blow on these rugs, the gauze ever so slowly begins to unravel itself when they move. You'll already see that happening a little bit here. You'll see in my piece looking for a sign that it is made out of tea bags, and they are from tea bags that I drink every day. I have sewn them together with gold thread to mimic the magic carpet's ability to transport. I see each tea bag as a contemporary way of fortune telling and understanding the present moment and future through our pasts. The images you see on that piece are recovered family photos that were lost for 40 years since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. And that's kind of a long story, so I'm not going to tell it now, but if it's something you'd love to hear, I'm happy to tell you, which is a very magical story. It is. In Haptics of the Fugitive Image, portraits from, it's made up of portraits from my family photo album that were found and are printed onto tea stain paper with my fingerprints as the mode of transfer. Something I think of in relation to the act of fingerprinting at borders. So, thank you.
I really do hope that you'll have time to read through our artist statements and the labels that we've created to highlight these ideas. They might be better than my off-the-cuff speaking about them, but I'd really like to invite Cynthia Brannvall to talk about her work inspired by our collection. So,
okay, thank you. I'm going to just say, briefly talk about this piece back here, Continents, which is also my work, because I think it'll help you understand my artistic practice. So these are, these represent or were inspired by my own continents of origin, Sweden, the United States, and Africa. And I was really creating this to kind of think of the longer histories that we all carry, and my identity, particularly complex ideas of voluntary and involuntary migration, and the presence of women. You can look at these, and not just the presence of women, but also cotton as an important signifier in my experience, but also a lot of these edges and trims are sort of like markers of rites of passages, baptisms, weddings, funerals, and the labor of women over time. That is that piece, but you're welcome to find your own story, and I hope you will find your own story in that work. And then I was invited to engage with their historical collection of clothing, which are these 3 dresses that you see. And my first thought was, I'm not a collaborator, but now I am. And once I looked at the clothing, I thought I was, because I use a lot of historical and antique clothing in my practice. And so I thought, and I have some busts that I make sculptures out of actual Victorian era blouses, and so they're headless. And I thought it'd be interesting to engage with the museum's collection by filling in that space or conjuring the presence of the head, but I didn't want to necessarily do a portrait, but wanted to kind of evoke the inner cosmos, if you will, the inside of people. And I was thinking about a variety of things. I was thinking about how we all have kind of this inner cosmos, but I was also thinking about history, and this one very personal. So this is called A Galaxy of Possibilities, evoking that idea of the inner cosmos that we all have. This one is called Not Quite Tame, and using the bird cage as a metaphor for these constraints and against women historically, even currently in many parts of the world. And I wanted to have this idea that even with those constraints, that possibility was always present in the interior life of women. And I used sea fans to sort of signify kind of flight from that. And then this one is the most personal. It's called Shadow Work number 2. It's part of a series that I'm doing, thinking about my own, thinking about cosmic black energy, dark matter as metaphors for possibility and intergenerational trauma, and also thinking about my own inner therapeutic work that I have done. So the first thing I want to say about this piece is that it's inspired by being raised by my grandmother, who was born in 1908. She is my beloved. She was essentially my mother. And so I was raised by somebody from a much older generation. I have weird quirks in my identity of being able to sew really well, and I know all the wonders of borax and things like that that are not my peers don't know about. But I titled this A Pickaninny World, and pickaninny is a very racialized term. It originated in the Caribbean, probably from pequeña, meaning small. But in the US, it came to be a derogatory racial remark towards small black children. And I'm not titling it that to invite people to put that into circulation again. I actually don't want to do that. But I was thinking about what it meant for me to be raised in a white family of Swedish people with very different, skin color and hair, and the kind of bias that had shaped who they were. And so this one is sort of speaking to that, to kind of provoke us to think about these terms that were created by adults, projected onto children, that are still sort of have currency in the world. If you think about young black people being killed by police violence, for one obvious example. So just as to be provocative, to think about what are these biases that we carry, and also to think about how they emerge in the intimacy of family and the intimacy of people that we love, that we cherish, right? That we can also experience those biases within families, within communities of color. So, end there. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for staying with us. Dana is here to tell us a little more, and then we will thank you all for being here.
I'm Dana Harris Seeger. Thank you so much. Promise I'm the last one. Well, I created these encaustic pieces, and I love what Trinh said about how art inspires and also helps us learn things. And I fully embrace that as an artist. Often I don't know exactly where things are going until I'm in the work. But I also feel like children are also that sort of inspiration and way of learning new things. And I am an identical twin, but I'm also now the mother of twins. And so I'm still alive. Thinking about my and my twins' experiences being shared, growing up in the same household by the same people, the same time, having the same experiences, but having totally different memories or remembering things differently about those experiences. And then how I can approach being a mother now, thinking about my children, having these experiences and kind of honoring what they bring to it. And so because I've had children and thinking about these childhood memories, I also wanted to look at the collection that they had here at the NUMU, because the history that we carry with us isn't just from our parents or for our children. It's from our ancestors that we might not even know that we have kind of embedded in us. And it's also cross-cultural. So the shoes on the right are my mother's baby shoes that she saved and now I saved. And these are from the collection. I think they are Paiute, people of the Great Basin. And what struck me about the shoes is that the symbols that are on them are also symbols of my Estonian and Baltic heritage. Estonian and Latvian is where my grandparents were born. And I was thinking that these are symbols that are familiar to me, but also are symbols that another culture that I have no connection to have used. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that we are seeing these similarities in the world and trying to represent them symbolically? And I was surprised the further I got that a lot of cultures use this sort of 8-pointed star, but also like what are the important elements that we save and why do we put them on these things? What do we choose to put them on? My ancestors weave them into clothing, into belts. We put them onto beaded shoes. We save these shoes because we want to remember and touch the things that maybe we can't remember. So it's all flowing together, thinking about the sense of place. These are motion sensing light boxes because for me memories are kind of interesting in the way that something can automatically trigger a memory that you hadn't thought of for ages, and then maybe you have a really hard time recalling a memory that you really want to. So just like what sparks that, and then what is hidden that is revealed through that memory. So there's a lot hidden in all of these. So please now take a look at everybody's artwork, read the statements, because they did a really great job bringing it all together. Not only our statements, but also the curators did a really great job. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I wanted to mention there's actually an interactive activity around the wall. We invite you to share a personal memory of your own life. And I wanted all of the artists and Cristiano and Julie and Kimberly to come up here for a moment, if possible. Yeah.